Fifth alarm. Working structure fire. 7741 Liberty Road Drive.
Johnny Cashman spoke to his family almost every day. So, when 6 full days passed without a single word from him, they knew something was wrong. Johnny lived in Lynchburg, Virginia, hundreds of miles from his family in Maine. So, with no way to check on him themselves, his relatives called the local police and requested a welfare check. On April 19, 2022, officers entered Johnny's apartment. Hours later, his parents received the phone call no parent ever wants. Their son had been found dead on the floor of his apartment. According to police, Johnny had suffered a medical emergency that led to severe gastrointestinal bleeding, an internal event that ultimately took his life. It was ruled a natural death, but to his family, that explanation made no sense. Johnny was only 38 years old and had recently passed a full medical exam with a clean bill of health just 4 months prior. Stunned by the news, they asked if there were any signs of foul play, a struggle, trauma, or even self-harm, but were assured by officers that nothing suspicious had been found. No drugs, no injuries, no evidence of violence. They were told he had likely died instantly, possibly from complications tied to drinking and tobacco use. Because of the seemingly straightforward nature of the case, no autopsy was performed, and when the family considered getting a private one, they were discouraged by investigators who insisted it wasn't necessary. Johnny's body was cremated and sent home to Maine, seemingly the end of a tragic but natural story. But it wasn't. The blood-soaked truth. 10 days after Johnny's body was discovered, his ex-girlfriend and her mother returned to his apartment to retrieve some of her belongings. She expected it to be a difficult visit emotionally, but nothing could have prepared her for what she found inside. Blood was everywhere. It pooled in the bathroom, was smeared on doors, streaked along walls, and splattered across the living room. It even stained a chair and a banister. Worst of all were the long, smeared handprints dragged across the walls, like something out of a horror film. Johnny's death, they were told, had been natural, instant even, but this scene told a completely different story. Horrified, they snapped photos of the apartment and rushed out, seeking help from a neighbor. That's when they learned something even more disturbing. The footage. Johnny's neighbor had a security camera facing the entrance of Johnny's unit, and on the day of his death, April 13th, it captured something chilling. At 3:03 p.m., Johnny was seen returning home, holding an empty glass. He didn't appear impaired and entered his apartment as usual. But just moments after he stepped inside, strange noises erupted from the unit.
Oh, dude, what the fuck? What are you doing? Yo, what the fuck, dude? What are you doing, man? What are you doing, man? Stop.
The camera's microphone picked up what sounded like a man yelling, repeatedly asking, "What are you doing?" and begging for something to stop. There were loud thuds and crashing sounds, as if a struggle or violent altercation was taking place inside. Then, silence. Roughly 7 minutes later, someone else exited Johnny's apartment. It wasn't Johnny. The man, whose identity was unknown at the time, nearly left the building before stopping. He turned around, went back up the stairs, and carefully wiped off the doorknob using his sleeve. Like he was trying to remove his fingerprints. Then he paused again on the stairs, visibly rattled, before finally composing himself and walking away. But the footage wasn't over. Just a minute after the man left, Johnny could be heard shouting for help from inside the apartment. Then, nothing. No more sounds, no more movement. Johnny would not be discovered until 5 days later. A story that didn't add up. The blood-covered apartment and the security footage seemed to completely contradict what police had told Johnny's family. He clearly hadn't died instantly, and someone else, someone unknown, had been inside the apartment at the time of his death. Even with the footage, police stuck to their original conclusion. Johnny died from a medical emergency. They revised their earlier statement, claiming the blood was caused by uncontrollable vomiting during a catastrophic GI bleed, and acknowledged that Johnny may have suffered, just not for long. But they still couldn't explain what exactly caused the bleeding. No autopsy had been performed, and now it was too late. Johnny had already been cremated, based on their initial claims that nothing suspicious had happened. What made this worse was that police had obtained the security footage the same day Johnny was found. They either hadn't reviewed it in full, or they didn't find it suspicious enough to warrant further investigation. But the internet disagreed. Who was the man in the video? As the footage circulated online, the public demanded answers. Who was the man seen leaving Johnny's apartment? Finally, on May 11th, investigators identified him as Stephen Church. Stephen told police he had recently moved to Lynchburg for a job that fell through shortly after his arrival, leaving him broke and homeless. That's when he met Johnny, who generously allowed him to crash on his couch. Stephen said he stayed there for 3 days and described Johnny as a heavy drinker. On the day of Johnny's death, he claimed they got into an argument about rent, but he insisted it was purely verbal, nothing physical. He said he left the apartment shortly afterward and only returned to wipe the doorknob because he feared Johnny might try to get him arrested for squatting. Having 2 felony convictions already, Stephen didn't want to risk jail again. Before leaving, Stephen claimed he saw Johnny hunched over the toilet, possibly vomiting, but said he left before anything serious happened. The flaws in his story. Stephen's version of events didn't align with what was heard in the security footage. The audio revealed no talk of rent, no back-and-forth argument. Instead, it sounded like one person yelling, panicking, and possibly struggling. At no point do we hear 2 clear voices arguing. Either the voice heard is Johnny's, begging for help.
What the fuck? What are you doing? Yo, what the fuck, dude?
Or it's Stephen's, reacting in horror. But either way, Stephen failed to mention the loud crashes and thuds, and his behavior after leaving the apartment, wiping fingerprints, panicking, strongly suggested something had gone terribly wrong. This led to 2 prevailing theories. There was a fight. Johnny and Stephen got into a physical altercation, and Stephen struck Johnny in the abdomen, triggering or worsening a GI bleed. Seeing the blood, Stephen panicked and fled, later trying to cover his tracks. Johnny collapsed naturally. Upon returning home, Johnny suffered a catastrophic medical emergency. In shock, Stephen yelled at him, tried to make sense of the situation, and fled out of fear of being blamed. But both theories raise the same question. Why didn't anyone call 911? Johnny's phone was later found inside the apartment, covered in blood. Maybe he tried. Maybe he was too disoriented. But Stephen certainly had the opportunity and chose not to. No closure. Despite the suspicious circumstances, the lack of physical evidence meant there was no way to prove foul play. Stephen's shoe prints weren't found in the blood, only Johnny's. Police said this indicated he wasn't involved in the struggle, and in October of 2022, the case was officially closed. Johnny's death was ruled a medical emergency, just as it had been from the start. Stephen Church was cleared of any wrongdoing, but to this day, many believe the real story of what happened in Johnny's apartment never came to light. Without an autopsy, we may never know the truth, and that disturbing footage, the screams, the thuds, the blood, and the stranger leaving the scene, leaves one haunting question behind. Did Johnny Cashman really die of natural causes? Or was something far more sinister at play? What's up, Silent Nightmare family? I have something huge to share with you today. We just crossed an incredible milestone, 50,000 subscribers. But now it's time to set our sights even higher. If we hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of September, 10 lucky subscribers will each receive a $50 gift card. You can choose any gift cards. That's $500 in total prizes as a thank you to this amazing community. It's super easy to enter. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like this video, comment below with your favorite Silent Nightmare video or your scariest camping story. That's it. Let's hit 100K together and celebrate the only way we know how, with a massive giveaway. It was still dark in Midlothian, Texas on the morning of April 18, 2016, when 45-year-old Terry Missy Bevers, a fitness instructor and mother of 3, began her usual routine. Dedicated to her fitness classes, she often taught early morning sessions, and that day was no different. She had a class scheduled at Creekside Church of Christ and, as always, arrived early to set up. At approximately 4:20 a.m., Missy pulled into the church parking lot, her headlights briefly illuminating the area before shutting off. With her workout equipment and supplies in hand, she made her way inside, unaware of the danger that awaited her. Unbeknownst to Missy, someone had already broken into the church hours before her arrival. At 3:50 a.m., security cameras captured a figure inside the building, wandering the halls in a manner that would later raise disturbing questions. The intruder was dressed head to toe in SWAT-style tactical gear, including a helmet, vest, and gloves, an outfit that completely obscured their identity. This was far from typical attire for someone committing a crime, leaving law enforcement puzzled as to whether it was merely a disguise or some kind of message. As the figure moved through the church, their actions were bizarre. Rather than heading straight for an office, a safe, or any other obvious target, they roamed the hallways, opening doors, checking rooms, and even tapping on walls. Their pace was calm, almost unhurried, as if they had all the time in the world. It did not seem like they were searching for anything specific. Instead, it felt as if they were simply waiting. At times, the intruder paused, standing motionless before continuing on, and their movements appeared awkward, almost as if they were unfamiliar with the church's layout, or in some sort of daze. A particularly eerie detail caught on camera was the figure's peculiar gait, a slight stagger, as though their shoes were too big, or they had a unique walking style. At 4:20 a.m., just as Missy entered the church, the security footage abruptly ended. To this day, it remains unclear how much time passed between Missy's arrival and her fatal encounter with the intruder. What is known is that a short time later, Missy's body was discovered by her students as they arrived for class. The scene was gruesome. She had suffered multiple blunt force injuries, believed to have been inflicted with a hammer, which was found near her body. Investigators immediately turned to the security footage, hoping to identify the killer. However, rather than providing clear answers, the footage only deepened the mystery. As the figure moved through the church, they periodically broke objects and shattered glass, leading police to initially suspect a staged robbery gone wrong. Yet this theory made little sense, as nothing of value had been taken. Not Missy's purse, not her iPad, nothing. Why target a church? What was the true motive? If this had been a burglary, it was a highly unusual one. With little evidence to go on, Midlothian police faced a daunting challenge. Detectives pored over the security footage, searching for any detail that might lead them to a suspect. One of the most perplexing aspects was the intruder's distinct walking style. Internet sleuths compared the footage to videos of people in Missy's life, including her father-in-law, noting a striking similarity in their gaits. However, this so-called evidence was circumstantial at best, and failed to provide any concrete leads. Initially, investigators even speculated that the intruder could be a woman, as their clothing appeared bulky, possibly disguising a smaller frame. But once again, this theory led nowhere. Desperate for answers, detectives turned their focus to Missy's personal life, interviewing family, friends, and acquaintances in search of a possible motive. They looked into her relationships, recent conflicts, and daily routine, hoping to uncover a lead. Missy's husband, Brandon, their 3 children, and her close friends fully cooperated, offering insight into her life. By all accounts, Missy was well-liked, deeply devoted to her family, and passionate about her work. However, some friends revealed that Missy had recently expressed concern over strange messages she had received on LinkedIn. These messages, reportedly from an unknown male, were described as unsettling and inappropriate. Investigators tracked down the sender, but the lead ultimately turned into another dead end. Despite meticulous investigation, every potential clue seemed to lead nowhere. Detectives documented everything they had learned, yet no single piece of evidence pointed directly to a suspect. To this day, the murder of Terry Missy Bevers remains unsolved, leaving both law enforcement and the public haunted by the chilling footage of the unknown figure roaming the church in the early hours of April 18, 2016. On August 15, 1989, a family of 3 was driving along interstate near Stockton, California, when their car began to overheat. Forced to pull over, the father popped the hood to check the damage. It didn't take long to realize they needed professional help. Leaving the mother behind to stay with the car, the father and his young son set out on foot to find a payphone. As they walked, the boy noticed something unusual, a camouflage jacket discarded by the side of the road. His curiosity piqued. He went over to take a closer look, only to find an unmarked VHS tape sticking out from one of its pockets. The boy picked up the tape and later brought it back home. By this point, his parents were also curious about what they'd find on this seemingly abandoned tape, so they inserted it into their home VHS player and pressed play. However, the contents of the tape were far darker than they could have imagined. The original unedited video has never been made available online, but different pieces from various sources have been compiled over time. The tape opened with the camera pointed at a massive fire at night, with what appeared to be the cameraman saying ominous things.
Look at the fire. This is my domain, my hell.
As the video continued, the camera refocused, revealing the source of the fire. A single-story home that looked like it was still under construction before it caught fire.
I call it home. My hell. The whole sky's black with smoke. The fire that I will destroy and burn your soul. Ancient spirit of evil.
Meanwhile, the cameraman kept talking, and the longer he spoke, the more unsettling it became. Later in the video, you could hear fire trucks arriving at the scene, with the cameraman commenting on it before ending the video with a direct threat to the viewer.
Look at it. The fire department's trying to put it out. What a laugh. I gotta go now. But remember me. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Your house is next.
The tape then abruptly cut to a scene from the 1984 horror film A Nightmare on Elm Street. It wasn't clear if the fire footage was taped over the movie or if this was a deliberate edit. However, one thing was certain. The disturbing video was filmed by the person who set the house on fire. The family handed the tape over to the police and told them exactly where and how they found it. Detectives went back to the location, and sure enough, the family's story checked out. The jacket was still there, but detectives also found several other items nearby, including a wooden pestle, a glove, a cassette of metal music, and a ceramic skull. After watching the video, investigators agreed that it was unlike anything they had seen before.
I've never run across anything as eerie as this tape. Frightened me, as a matter of fact. I thought about it that night when I went to bed.
Unfortunately, the poor filming conditions and shaky nature of the footage prevented them from extracting any meaningful clues about the fire's location. Despite conducting a frame-by-frame analysis, investigators were unable to match the tape with any reported fires in California. For all they knew, the fire could have happened anywhere in the US. As for the possible motive, the cameraman's constant talk of hell and evil led investigators to believe that the incident might have been related to Satanism. While this theory may seem far-fetched today, in the 1980s, fears about devil worshippers committing crimes were widespread. However, without any solid leads, this remained just speculation. After exhausting all other options, investigators decided to enlist the help of the media. They featured the story on the popular TV show Unsolved Mysteries in September 1990. This decision paid off better than they could have imagined. Within 2 hours of the episode airing, investigators received over 1,000 calls from viewers with potential leads. Among the many callers was a man named Ed Tarantino, who was shaken after seeing the found footage on TV. He recognized the burning house because he had lived next to it in Redwood City, California, about 80 miles west of where the tape was originally found. More importantly, the show also led investigators to Bill Otherly, the owner of the under-construction home seen burning in the video.
And turned up, it's my house that's on the videotape. And then you heard the voice of this individual. And you go, this guy ain't playing with a full deck.
He described the incident as the act of a crazy person. The fire had completely destroyed the house, resulting in an estimated loss of $900,000, about $2.5 million in today's money. The Redwood City Fire Department also confirmed the incident, revealing that they had recorded their own footage of the fire for training purposes. Parts of this official footage matched the mysterious VHS tape, proving that the arsonist had been only about 50 feet away from the firefighters while recording his video.
The fire department's trying to put it out. What a laugh.
The only clue investigators had about the suspect was a name mentioned in the video, Omar. It wasn't much, and for a while, the case seemed to be at a dead end. That is, until the police received a new tip from a woman named Doris Lance, another Unsolved Mysteries viewer. She suspected that the Omar mentioned in the video,
Look at it, Omar. This is what I've been doing on your week's vacation. I settled it. I settled it.
was referring to a 17-year-old boy who lived in the area. When police brought Omar in for questioning, he cracked almost immediately and told them everything. He claimed that he had been silently standing off camera when the video was filmed. According to him, the fire had been started and recorded by his 19-year-old friend. Investigators were finally closing in on the perpetrator, but they needed more evidence before making an arrest. They began tailing the alleged arsonist from a distance. However, he must have caught wind of the police surveillance because, soon after, his garage mysteriously burned to the ground. At that point, the police had no choice but to act. On September 27, 1990, they confronted the 19-year-old suspect. Just like Omar, he quickly confessed. The authorities never publicly revealed the identities of the two boys, so, for convenience, we'll refer to the arsonist as J.N. After searching J.N.'s home, investigators found a trove of incriminating evidence linking him not only to the Redwood City fire, but also to 11 other structure fires and 15 grass fires. Among the evidence was a picture of graffiti on a wall that read, "Please no more houses," and a news clipping about recent arson cases, which the two boys had likely committed. But that wasn't all. In J.N.'s burned-down garage, investigators discovered bloody knives and mutilated animal parts. They also found tapes containing disturbing footage of J.N. dressed as a satanic vampire, threatening a humanoid sculpture with a knife.
How you doing, Father? I hope you're doing real good.
However, not all the footage was theatrical. One of the most notable clips showed the two boys goofing around in an open field.
To finish the job.
That field, as it turned out, was being transformed into a housing development. It's likely that the boys were furious about the changes and decided to take matters into their own hands by torching under-construction homes. This could also explain the eerie graffiti investigators found earlier. Despite the severity of their crimes, both boys were minors when they started the fires, so they were tried as juveniles. Omar was sent to juvenile detention, while J.N. was deemed mentally unwell and admitted to a mental institution. What happened to them after that remains a mystery. Some online claims suggest that J.N. was released from the institution and died in a car accident in 2017. While there is no direct evidence to confirm this, a news report from January 2017 details a hit and run in Redwood City in which the victim was 45 years old. the same age JN would have been at the time. However, if this case is unrelated and JN is still alive, it's unlikely he would resurface just to satisfy the curiosity of internet sleuths. As for the tape itself, it remains unclear how it ended up on the side of the interstate. It was 9 a.m. on May 18, 2024. Residents of Charlotte, North Carolina, awoke to a terrifying sight, thick black smoke rising rapidly into the sky. The source? A massive fire engulfing a 7-story apartment complex, still under construction, what was intended to be a luxury development with 239 high-end units. Thankfully, no tenants had moved in yet, but the building's incomplete status created 2 serious problems. First, the top 5 floors were little more than a wooden skeleton, exposed beams, insulation, and framing. In other words, a tinderbox. So, when the fire began, it spread at a horrifying pace. Second, and even more urgent, the structure was active. That morning, 17 construction workers had clocked in. When firefighters arrived, the flames were already out of control, and lives were in immediate danger. Crews rushed inside, battling the smoke and heat to evacuate the workers. They successfully led 15 of them out to safety. But outside, the gut-wrenching realization hit. 2 men were still missing. Somewhere deep inside the burning maze, DeMonte Sherrill, 30, and his colleague Reuben Holmes were trapped. Their voices could be heard faintly through the smoke, calling out for help. But they weren't just shouting into the fire. They turned to social media in a desperate attempt to survive.
Say hell, we're in South Park. Help! I'm at South Park right now. At work, in a building on fire. And I can't get out.
DeMonte started a Facebook live stream. On camera, he and Reuben appeared disoriented, surrounded by dense, choking smoke. The fire hadn't yet reached them, but the conditions were deteriorating fast. The 6th floor where they were stranded had only one exit.
It's getting harder and harder for them to see us. We're gonna have to stand out here and see. The building on fire, I'm trapped inside, me and my man.
A stairwell on the opposite side of the structure, and that route had already been blocked. There was no safe way down. Jumping from the 6th floor meant certain death. Rescue was their only hope. DeMonte grew increasingly desperate on the stream, shouting for help while Reuben flashed his phone's light, trying to give rescuers a visual signal through the smoke, but the thick haze made locating them nearly impossible.
Yo, this building is on fire. I'm at work. Somebody send help. We're in South Park.
In one haunting moment captured on the live stream, a crane with a basket, part of the rescue effort, appeared in the background, but it was facing the wrong direction, lost in the smoke. It's believed the operator may have briefly spotted the men.
Help!
But the blaze was too intense. Even the crane operator had to be rescued. The situation was dire. There was only one option left. Go in after them. Firefighters climbed the stairs to the 6th floor and began working their way across the burning structure, knowing time was running out. Every step was slower than the last, as flames raged around them and visibility dropped to almost nothing. And then they heard screaming. They were close, but at that very moment, another sound cut through the chaos. A radio transmission ordering all personnel to evacuate. The building was on the verge of collapse. With no other choice, the rescuers called out to DeMonte and Reuben one last time, but received no answer. They were forced to leave. Minutes later, the entire structure collapsed, the temperature inside reaching over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. DeMonte Sherrill and Reuben Holmes were never seen alive again.
All companies working 7741 Liberty Road Drive, evacuate structure, per command. All companies working 7741 Liberty Road Drive, evacuate structure.
Command all companies, this will be defensive at this time.
We'll be ready for this side to collapse.
Everybody get out of the collapse zone.
Confirming you are coming out, but you're not out of the building.
They were the only two fatalities of the fire. What makes this tragedy even more heartbreaking is how DeMonte's final moments were witnessed in real time by his own friends and family. Many of them had no idea he'd just started this job that week. His own mother watched the live stream, so did his brother, who rushed to the scene and pleaded with first responders to watch the footage to help find them. An investigation later revealed the cause of the fire.
It collapsed.
A piece of machinery used to spray organic foam insulation, a highly flammable material, caught fire. Once lit, the foam produced thick, deadly smoke that filled the structure almost instantly.
Right now, at work, in a building on fire, and I can't get out. It's getting harder and harder for them to see us.
To make matters worse, there were no smoke detectors installed yet, and the area where DeMonte and Ruben had been trapped, a temporary stairwell had just been removed to make way for a permanent one, leaving them with no escape. As a result of these failures, the construction companies involved were fined $50,000 and now face lawsuits filed by the victims' families. But no amount of money can undo what happened. DeMonte, Cheryl, and Ruben Holmes weren't just workers. They were sons, brothers, friends. And for a few excruciating minutes, they were voices in the smoke, trying to be heard. And now, they are memories, burned into the hearts of those who watched helplessly as tragedy unfolded in real time. Alyssa Turney was a typical 17-year-old high school junior living in Phoenix, Arizona, with her father, Michael Turney, and half-sister, Sarah. Like most teenagers, she had a part-time job, friends, and dreams for the future. But on May 17, 2001, everything changed. That was the day Alyssa vanished without a trace, and the mystery of her disappearance would leave her family and community searching for answers for years to come. It was the last day of school, and Alyssa was looking forward to summer break. She and her friends had made plans to celebrate, and it seemed like the beginning of a carefree summer. But what happened that afternoon remains clouded by strange details, some coming from her father, Michael, who was the last person to see her. According to Michael, he picked up Alyssa from Paradise Valley High School around lunchtime. He claimed they went out for a meal at a local restaurant, and upon returning home, they had a heated argument. Michael later told police that Alyssa stormed off, shouting that she was leaving for California to live with her biological aunt. To back up this story, he claimed to have found a note in Alyssa's room, written in her handwriting, stating that she was running away. However, Alyssa's friends and family found this highly suspicious. None of her belongings, such as her phone or purse, were missing. If she truly intended to run away, why would she leave behind everything she needed? And why hadn't she told any of her close friends about her plans? Initially, authorities treated Alyssa's case as that of a runaway, believing she might have gone to California or was still in the Phoenix area. However, doubts arose when her $1,800 savings remained untouched and she failed to contact anyone. As police investigated further, they discovered troubling details about Michael's behavior. He had been tracking Alyssa in ways that went beyond normal parental protection. At her job, co-workers noticed Michael would appear unannounced, sometimes carrying a video camera. In one instance, he secretly recorded her interactions with customers and friends, claiming it was for her safety. His surveillance extended into their home. Michael had installed hidden recording devices, including in the living room. It remains unclear how often he reviewed these recordings, but his need to control Alyssa's actions and conversations was evident. Michael also kept strict control over her social life, reportedly screening her phone calls and limiting her time with friends. Alyssa's friends recalled that his behavior made her feel trapped. Over time, she became increasingly resentful of his overbearing surveillance. But the situation became even more disturbing when police interviewed those close to Alyssa. Her friends, boyfriend, and stepbrother all independently shared troubling accounts of Michael's inappropriate behavior toward her. One alleged that during a car ride, Michael scooted closer to Alyssa and attempted to touch her inappropriately. Adding to the suspicion, Michael himself once called Child Protective Services to preemptively claim that if Alyssa ever accused him of abuse, she was lying. an unusual move for a supposedly innocent father. Furthermore, Michael fixated on a claim that Alyssa had been assaulted by a teacher years prior, though no evidence supported this. His account of the alleged incident frequently changed, and Alyssa had never mentioned it to her friends. Many believed he used this story to justify his extreme control over her. Another major inconsistency arose when police contacted Alyssa's aunt in California. She had not heard from Alyssa and wasn't expecting her. This contradicted Michael's claim that Alyssa had run away to stay with her. As authorities pieced everything together, the case started looking less like a runaway situation and more like a potential crime. However, with no concrete evidence, the case stalled. One of the most unsettling details was Michael's lack of urgency after Alyssa disappeared. Most parents of missing children are frantic, calling friends and visiting places their child might be. Michael, however, waited 5 days before reporting Alyssa missing. When asked why, he claimed he thought she would return once she cooled off, insisting she was just a rebellious teen. For years, Alyssa's younger sister, Alyssa Turney, refused to let the case go cold. As she grew older, she began questioning Michael's version of events and recognized inconsistencies in his story. She initially tried discussing her concerns within the family, but Michael continued insisting Alyssa had run away and wanted nothing to do with them. Frustrated with the lack of progress, Alyssa turned to social media to raise awareness. She shared Alyssa's story on various platforms, but it wasn't until she joined TikTok that her fight gained real momentum. On TikTok, Alyssa openly accused her stepfather of being responsible for Alyssa's disappearance. Her boldness shocked many, but her transparency drew support from people who admired her courage to speak out against a family member. Sarah's relentless advocacy finally paid off. In August 2020, nearly 2 decades after Alyssa disappeared, police arrested Michael Turney and charged him with second-degree murder. Investigators pointed to his controlling behavior as a key factor in reopening the case. However, the prosecution faced a major challenge: the lack of direct physical evidence linking Michael to Alyssa's disappearance. Despite this hurdle, Sarah and her supporters remained hopeful that the circumstantial evidence and Michael's suspicious actions would lead to a conviction. In July 2023, Michael Turney's trial began. After 6 days of testimony, the defense filed a motion for acquittal, arguing that the prosecution had not presented enough substantial evidence. The judge agreed, citing the absence of physical proof that Alyssa was dead, or that Michael was responsible. As a result, Michael was acquitted of all charges and released from custody on July 18, 2023. Following his release, Michael Turney took legal action against local officials. In January 2024, he filed a lawsuit against the Phoenix Police Department, alleging mistreatment during his time in custody. He claimed he was denied adequate health care and meals, and asserted that he was wrongfully imprisoned. As of today, Alyssa Turney's case remains unsolved, leaving her family and supporters still searching for justice.
If Alyssa's out there, any message for her?
Same message I've always tried to give it.
Which is?
I love her.
You want her to come home?
Obviously so.
In the early morning hours of August 15, 2002, a horrific discovery shook the small town of Bassett, Virginia. The day started like any other for Chris Thompson, an employee of Michael Short's mobile home moving business. He was scheduled to meet his employer at the Short family residence just before 9 a.m. to drive together to Christiansburg and pick up a truck. However, as Thompson approached the property located off US Route 220, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The first unusual detail that caught his attention was the open garage door. While this alone might not have been cause for alarm, it was an odd sight given the early hour. Expecting to find Michael Short either working on a vehicle or still asleep, Thompson entered the garage. What he found instead would haunt him for years to come. Lying lifeless on a couch where he often slept to avoid disturbing his wife with his snoring was 50-year-old Michael Short. He had been shot once in the head with what investigators later determined to be a small caliber weapon. The precision of the shot and the lack of defensive wounds suggested that Michael had been killed while he slept, unaware of the danger that had entered his home. Shocked and disoriented, Thompson decided to search for the other members of the Short family. With growing dread, he entered the main house. In the master bedroom, he found the body of 36-year-old Mary Short. Like her husband, she had been shot once in the head while lying in bed. As Thompson moved through the house, a chilling realization dawned on him. There was no sign of the Shorts' 9-year-old daughter, Jennifer. Her absence from the crime scene would soon transform this double homicide into a complex investigation involving multiple jurisdictions and law enforcement agencies. Upon discovering the bodies, Thompson contacted the Henry County Sheriff's Office. Investigators found .22 caliber shell casings, one near Michael's body in the garage and another next to Mary in the bedroom. This discovery confirmed that both victims had been killed by the same perpetrator using the same firearm. The choice of a .22 caliber weapon was significant, as it is relatively quiet, suggesting the killer may have been trying to minimize noise to avoid alerting neighbors or other family members. One of the most chilling pieces of evidence was the discovery that the phone lines to the house had been cut. This deliberate act pointed to a high level of premeditation, as the killer had clearly planned the attack in advance, taking steps to prevent the victims from calling for help. The timeline of the crime became a crucial element of the investigation. Based on when Thompson had last seen the family alive and when he discovered the bodies, authorities established that the attack occurred sometime after midnight on August 14th. As investigators combed through the Short family home, they made another disturbing discovery in Jennifer's bedroom. Several signs of disturbance suggested she had been abducted from her bed. Her mattress had been moved about 2 inches from its usual position. Her sheets were pulled back, and her pillow was found on the floor. This added a new layer of urgency to the investigation. Despite the violent nature of the crime, there were no signs of forced entry, leading investigators to consider the possibility that the Shorts may have known their attacker or that the perpetrator had found a way to enter without arousing suspicion. Another puzzling aspect was the apparent lack of robbery as a motive. Investigators found approximately $600 in cash untouched on the kitchen counter, along with blank checks belonging to the Shorts. The presence of these valuables ruled out theft as the primary motivation. Law enforcement expanded their search beyond the crime scene, scouring surrounding farmland, groves, and woods using helicopters, search dogs, and four-wheel drive vehicles. However, intermittent rain hampered their efforts. The sheriff's office kept the Shorts' home closed off for more than 2 weeks, carefully scanning every inch for potential clues. They collected an extensive amount of DNA evidence, though officials have never specified its exact nature or quantity. Official affidavits revealed that approximately 66 items were removed from the home, including a 12-gauge Winchester shotgun, a box of shotgun shells, given their potential connection to the shell casings found at the scene. Investigators also seized a computer disk and unidentified documents contained in a briefcase, which could potentially hold valuable information about the Short family's personal and business affairs. One intriguing piece of evidence was a reported note found on the kitchen table, though authorities have never publicly disclosed its contents. In the days following the crime, law enforcement conducted extensive interviews with family members, friends, and associates. Chris Thompson, who had been with the Shorts the night before their murder, was questioned extensively. He reportedly told police that when he left late on the evening of August 14th, the entire family was alive and well, with Jennifer already in bed. Thompson was presumably cleared as a suspect, as officers stated that he was open and cooperative throughout the investigation. Since the Shorts had recently put their home on the market, investigators also examined real estate records to see who had toured the property, based on the theory that the perpetrator might have used the opportunity to familiarize themselves with the layout. However, it's unclear whether this led to any significant leads. As news of the murders and Jennifer's disappearance spread, the community rallied together. Volunteers joined law enforcement in search efforts, combing through the rural landscape surrounding the Short property. Amber alerts were issued, and Jennifer's information and picture were displayed on billboards across Virginia. Despite extensive efforts, no trace of her was found immediately after the crime. The investigation quickly grew to involve multiple agencies, including the Virginia State Police and the FBI. The FBI's involvement brought additional resources, including access to their extensive fingerprint database and advanced forensic capabilities. Weeks passed with no sign of Jennifer, and hope of finding her alive began to fade. Then, on September 25, 2002, approximately 6 weeks after her disappearance, A grim discovery was made in Rockingham County, North Carolina, about 35 miles south of the Short family home. Eddie Albert, a local resident, initially found what he thought was a piece of a wig on his property. 2 days later, his dogs brought him what appeared to be part of a human skull. Realizing the significance of the find, Albert contacted authorities. Law enforcement quickly responded, focusing their search on a creek running through Albert's yard. As investigators combed through the area, they uncovered more human remains. Only about a quarter of a skeleton was recovered, with the remains scattered, likely due to water currents or animal activity. Among the recovered bones were Jennifer's skull, leg bones, part of her jaw, ribcage bones, and 16 teeth. Initially, there was some uncertainty about whether the remains were Jennifer's, as authorities noted the hair color did not match. However, by early October, DNA testing confirmed the remains belonged to Jennifer Short. Further examination revealed that, like her parents, Jennifer had suffered a single gunshot to the head. Following the discovery, authorities intensified efforts to find the killer. In October 2002, they named Garrison Bowman, a 60-year-old carpenter from Madison, North Carolina, as a material witness and later a potential suspect. Bowman had last been seen in the area on August 15th, the day after the Shorts were killed. He had also left a note in his mailbox stating he had moved to Alaska, but deputies noted he had actually requested his mail be forwarded to an address in Pennsylvania. Law enforcement seized 9 maps from his mobile home, one of which was marked with the location of the Shorts' home. Despite these suspicions, authorities were careful not to label Bowman a definitive suspect. Sheriff Sam Page stated, "He has not been listed as a suspect, but we do need to talk to him." Bowman was eventually located in Canada and interviewed. He vehemently denied involvement, stating, "This will hang over me for the rest of my life unless they find the person who did it." He cooperated with investigators, providing DNA samples and answering questions. By 2007, authorities officially cleared him as a suspect. The focus on Bowman had consumed thousands of investigative hours, which some critics argue may have diverted resources from other potential leads.